Wholesaling is a broad term used to explain essentially the securing of a discounted item and then reselling it for a profit. That goes across the board on anything. That's not just real estate. But when we apply the term wholesaling to real estate, there are several ways that we may be able to take this transaction down. There are two primary ways that we talk about and are often confused and people do not understand. We have what is commonly called a double close is one option. Double closes can be also called sometimes a simultaneous close. Sometimes it will be called an ABBC transaction. What do I mean by an ABBC transaction? Who is the A in that party? The seller. Who is the B? Me. And who is the C? The end buyer. So the contract goes from A to B and then B to C. An ABBC transaction. So I'll actually buy the property from the seller as the wholesaler. Okay, we got it that so far? I'm the wholesaler. I will physically buy the house from the seller. I will then turn around and resell the house simultaneously within 24 hours. That will be called like a double close, simultaneous close, ABBC close. Alternatively, we will also have what's more often known as the assignment of contract. We call all of this wholesaling, but we have alternate exit strategies for this particular strategy. An assignment of contract is I get the seller to sign a contract. I am the buyer of that I am the buyer on that contract. I then sell the contract to somebody else and they buy the house. I'm going to repeat that again, just in case I confuse somebody. With an assignment of contract, I will go get a property under contract. I will then sell the contract to somebody else and allow them to buy the house. Okay? Now, why would I do one versus the other? Why would I double close a property versus assign a property?
Money. The profit can be too big.
Yeah, a lot of the times, the only benefit I see to double closing a contract is a double close of the contract will hide your profit from everyone. No one will know how much money you made. So a double close is my way of hiding my profit. So if I am super concerned about somebody knowing how much money I made, I will double close the property. Double closing the property might include some additional fees. I might have to pay title twice. I may have to use some transactional funds to get the money to close on this property. You know, there's some additional things going on with a double close, but a double close will allow me to close without disclosing my profit. Did I have a question pop up there? Yes. Well, we need microphones. I don't know where the microphone got lost. There we go. We got two hands popped up over here. I don't know whose hands they were. Don't be shy now. All right, one hand. There we go.
As a buyer, when we work with wholesalers in the past, some of the larger ones that we all
I wouldn't
know,
have done it.
they all do double closes. Is that the reason why?
I'm assuming you're talking about New Western or Net Worth.
Bingo.
Like if you are, in my opinion, I would never buy from those two people. That is my opinion.
New Western or
Net Worth.
Net Worth, yeah.
That is my opinion. Like everybody will have their own opinion, but I would never do business with either of those two. That's just me personally. That's a similar business model. But I would not.
So with other wholesalers, other people in this room, is that common to double close?
Assignments of contract, I would say, is the predominant way to close.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
We're selling the contract. Assignment.
Yeah, an assignment of contract is selling my rights to the contract.
For her though, she's was mainly a flipper. You should never be worried about wholesale. If the numbers work for you, the numbers work for you.
Yeah. So when you're running the due diligence, run your own due diligence. And let me explain a business model that happens. You will find a very experienced person that will find the most inexperienced wholesaler that they can and lock their contract up. They will then go find the most inexperienced remodeler that they can and pair the two together and take everything they possibly can out of the middle. So you got to be careful. You really need to run and know your due diligence. You cannot trust anything that is being given to you. You need to verify repairs. You need to verify comps. And you do not need to get yourself pressured in to buying something. Okay? Any other questions pop up over there? Yes.
Yeah, so just to get this straight, a double close, it's a A to B process and then a B to C later.
So with a double close, let's do some role play real quick. Can you be my seller? Sure. All right, I'm gonna be the buyer. I'm gonna sit down with you and I'm gonna sign the contract. And then once I've got the contract, you're gonna be my other buyer. I'm gonna say, hey, would you like to buy a house from me? Yep, all right, here, I'll sign a contract with you. I now have a contract with you to buy it from you, and I now have an actual contract to sell it to you. It's not an assignment. I have an actual purchase agreement between you and I have a purchase agreement between you and I. I will schedule on February 1st for you and I to come in first thing in the morning and sign all of our paperwork. I will then have you come in later in the day and I'll have all my paperwork signed with you. How does the title to that house move? The title from the house goes from you to me. I will own the house for about 15 minutes and then it'll go to you. That's how a double close works. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So when you do that, the seller won't know how much you're making on that.
The seller will not know at all. The buyer will not know. The only person that will know is me, because I'll have a HUD with him and I'll have a HUD with him. HUD being the closing disclosure. I can't call it a closing disclosure because they actually have CDs now. It's the HUD.
Two purchase agreements, right?
So yeah, I'll have two separate purchase agreements. There will be no assignment.
No assignment, okay.
Nope. It'll just be a purchase agreement with he and I, and we're done. Not all title offices will do it, and that's why you really need to know who your title companies are. Now, I don't know if I get into this because I haven't scanned my slides beforehand. There was a very common prior to 2008 for me to sign a contract with you. I'll sign a contract with you, but for me to buy the house from you, I got to come up with some money. Like, for me to buy the house from you, let's say I've got a contract with you for 100 grand. Somewhere 100 grand needs to hit that title company. Well, if I've turned around and sold the house to you for 120 grand, what I'll do is get you to wire your $120,000 to the title company, and I'll take 100,000 of that to pay him, and I'll take the 20 out of the middle. That was called a dry funding. We did that a lot in 2008 and before. After 2008 hit, a lot of disclosures started happening, and we had to do a lot of different things. That right there kind of went away. I say kind of, but like it takes a lot more nuances to pull that off. Now, I have to bring my own 100 grand to the table, pay you 100 grand, you bring 120 grand to the table, and I get my 100 grand back plus 20,000 more. Does that make sense? If I confused you, let's talk through it. That's why we're in a classroom right now. The whole point of you taking these 2 days off was to make sure that you upped your knowledge. And if I have confused you, then I have done the exact opposite of what I've taken the time out of my family's life to do, which is educate you. So if you are confused, you're doing yourself a disservice and me a disservice by not asking the questions. Because there might be somebody else in the room that is confused and that no one's willing to answer the question.
So then in that process, let's say you don't have the 100,000 of cash.
Hold on a second, we got a microphone coming. Sorry about that. I'm not remembering.
My question is, so if you are in that process, but you don't have the 100,000 cash, and that's when at that point is when you come up or you go into transactional funding. Is that right?
So transactional funding, for those that do not know about it, a lot of times there will be lenders out there that will give you a 24-hour loan. A lot of times they'll do that 24-hour loan for 1% of the loan. So if you needed to borrow 100 grand, they charge you $1,000. They wire the money to the title company. It really never leaves the title company. It just goes to the title company to prove that it's there. Your 120 grand comes in. My 100 grand comes in from the transactional funder. There's now $220,000 sitting there. You get paid 100 grand. I get 20 grand, and the other guy gets 100 grand back. It all stays at the escrow office. It never leaves the escrow office. Does that make sense? All right, so why would I double close? Really, the only purpose to a double close is to disclose or to hide my profit. Now, there will be some rare occasions where people double close for other reasons outside of that. I'm not really intimately familiar with it. One common strategy, especially here in Texas, is we live right now on the Barnett Shale. Barnett Shale is a natural gas reserve that we hit. Well, mineral rights. Mineral rights are attached to property. One thing that was very common for a long period of time is during these assignments or double closes, reservations of mineral rights would go to whoever was wholesaling it. The wholesaler would intentionally reserve the mineral rights in the transaction because they wanted the cash flow from the land lease, the ground lease. So that was an alternate strategy being used, is we would lease the mineral rights out by retaining the mineral rights to all transactions. Okay? So, question.
Yeah, quick question on that. When you just gave us the example of the gentleman there with the white cap being the seller, this is a double close, right?
Yes.
And he's your buyer.
Yes.
Right? You're gonna sell it to this guy right here. So you have both of them come to the title company on the same day, of course.
Same day at different
But
times.
I noticed you had the buyer come in and sign in first before the seller. Why is that?
Very
Explain that.
important question. And I'm going to explain that because it is very important that we do it this way. Do I want to put myself in a situation where I've got transactional funds in, he's executed all of his documents, I've executed all the documents with him, and then he doesn't show up?
No.
That's a bad situation. So what I want to do is I'll get him in, and I know I've got all of his paperwork signed. Once I know all of his,
And his money as
and
well?
his money's
money
there,
is already
and
there.
all of his paperwork signed, I now know that my buyer has performed. He's done everything he's supposed to do. I now know this transaction is moving forward. I will then schedule him in later in the day by himself, or I'll show up with him. He will sign all of his paperwork. I now know that this side of the transaction is ready to go, this side of the transaction is ready to
Then
go,
you sign.
and then I come in and I'll sign all the paperwork with both of them, and then we're done. So it's done in that order specifically because I don't want to close with him in the morning with TC, with transactional funding, to find out he didn't show up in the afternoon. That could be a really bad day for me. Always get the buyer in first, get the buyer fully executed with funds in, and then I'll execute both sides of the transaction and close. Yes, sir.
So that won't be a problem with the title company by you, because you have the contract? Is that how you can get by having your end buyer sign the documents?
So what
And
so the reason I do this, and I'll have an addendum to my purchase agreement. I won't just use a traditional purchase agreement. I'll have a fairly lengthy addendum, and a disclosure in that addendum, will say, I am not currently owner of the property via contract. I am owner, or F it, let me pull it up real quick. I'll read to you what it says. It might take me a second to find it. It's not up there. So if y'all want to hear what it says, give me a moment to pull it up here. Let me just see if I can find it here. Dropbox, I-35 properties, toolbox. Just so y'all can see real quick, like I'll pull this up there, I think. This toolbox, oops, I put the wrong one up there. Let me get that one back. Sorry. All right. This toolbox is a list of everything I keep in my car at all times. Like that's all of the paperwork I keep in my car at all times. So we were talking about a double close addendum. I'll be damned if I can read it from over there. Where's the double close addendum? That's 202 double close addendum. 202 double close addendum. Let me see. Sorry, I clicked on it. I'm running two screens at once, so I've got to figure out which screen I'm operating off of. This is a double close addendum right here. So where is that at? Down payment, cash sale, acknowledgement, closing cost reimbursements, additional disclosures and acknowledgements, inspection report and subject property condition, real estate agent brokerage, marketable title acknowledgement. At the time of this agreement, seller owns a contract for sale and purchase of subject property. Buyer acknowledges that seller currently does not own title to subject property. This sale is contingent upon seller obtaining marketable title to subject property under seller's purchase contract. If seller is unable to obtain marketable title to subject property, then seller shall return buyer's down payment, and this agreement is void with no further obligations between parties. So I disclose in my addendum. One of the key things that I think should always be done, always be done, is disclose everything that's happening. Never try and keep something from somebody, because that right there is just saying that you were not willing to tell them. And if you were not willing to tell them, then you were doing something wrong. I always disclose everything I'm doing to all parties, and that leaves me in my highest state of conscience feeling like I've done nobody wrong, because everybody knew exactly what I was doing. Okay? So that right there is a double close addendum. I don't know if it's on this one. Let me see if it's on this one right here. Property access limitation, lead-based paint, conveyance buyer, although... Seller assigns or reserves all existing mineral rights to the property. However, seller waives and conveys to buyer the right of ingress and egress to and from the surface of the property relating to the portion of the mineral estate owned by seller or other entities. Believe it or not, when I'm standing up here talking about this stuff, it's because I've done it. Like, these are my addendums. This is all of my paperwork. This is everything that I was doing inside of my business. A lot of people still question me to this day, why would I be willing to stand up here and give away this valuable information? How much does this class like this typically cost? $2,000. It's not cheap. Do y'all feel like I've held anything back from you? No, I have not. It is what it is. Like, I've made it to a point in life where I don't need to make money off of y'all to teach y'all how to do this. I know how the real estate completely and totally changed my life. There is not a chance in hell I'd be standing here right now if it was not for real estate. And I know damn good and well if I could have done it, anyone in this room could have done it. Like, why would I withhold this information from you just because I didn't get paid? So, moving forward. What is a double close? Let me see if I can find that back here on my laptop again. I've got like 5 screens to look at. All right. We all confident on what a double close is? I only heard 2 people say yes. Yes. All right. An assignment. We've talked about it for a second. An assignment is where I take the contract, I get the property under contract, and I sell the contract. And then somebody else gets to buy the house. That's an assignment of contract. Okay? Now, let me see. Let me scan through this real quick to see what I was trying to talk about. Take it down, building a buyer's list. All right, so assignment of contract versus a double close. Double close will include additional fees. I'm going to have to pay the title company for escrow twice. I'm going to have to pay the title company for title insurance twice, possibly. I'm going to have to pay the title company twice. In addition to that, I may have to tie up a transaction coordinator. So let's just say all in all, it costs me an extra $1,500, let's call it an extra $2,000 to double close that property. If my margins are thin, that $2,000 can get eaten up really fast. To take an extra layer on top of that, if I do 10 of these transactions in a year, that's $20,000 in fees that I have pulled out of my bottom line. That's a lot of money. An assignment of contract on the other side, though, I don't have any of those associated fees. Who pays the title companies? Buyer. Who pays the non-existent transactional funding? Nobody. I didn't have to have any transactional funding. So I'm able to eliminate $2,000 in fees out of my title immediately just by assigning the contract. Now, the reason why most people want to double close is they don't want anybody to know what their profit was. Well, there's an alternate way to close an assignment of contract that will oftentimes remove the disclosure of my profit from the seller. Whenever I look at a HUD, the HUD is the Housing and Urban Development Closing Statement, blah, 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 whatever. It's got a left side column, which represents all of the buyer's information, and they have a right side column that represents all of the seller's information. My assignment fee, who pays my assignment fee? The buyer. Where would my assignment fee show up on that HUD? On the buyer side of the column. We can do what's called a blind side HUD. The seller does not need to know all of my financials, and the seller does not need to know all of my financials. And if the seller does not need to know all of my financials, then whenever the seller receives their HUD, they do not see my assignment fee anywhere on that HUD. So we'll do what's called a blind side HUD. The seller will sign off on their information and they'll get to figure out the one thing that they've known all along, which is what their profit was going to be. They knew they were going to make 20 grand. They'll see 20 grand right there. Now, am I ever lying to the seller saying that I'm doing this for free? But did I ever sit down and tell the seller, hey, I plan to make $18,000? No. When you go to a retail place, do you see two prices on there? This is what we paid for it. This is what you're buying for it. This is our profit. No, because some people might not like the fact that Walmart makes like $60 on something they sold you for $64. You're like, well, that's too much. Well, you know, we got to stay in business somehow. Because one thing that's hard to explain to the seller is while I may have grossed $18,000 on this contract, I spent $12,000 in 3 months trying to get it, which means I netted $6,000 for 3 months worth of work. I made $2,000 a month. It's hard to explain that to a seller, though. All the seller sees is 18 grand. Okay, so that's why you have to be aware that, you know, you don't want to blow up the transaction disclosing to the seller what your profit actually was. And I do not feel unethical about keeping my profit to myself. So I'll run a double HUD, a blind HUD. The seller will receive their HUD, I will receive mine, and on my side of the HUD, or the buyer's side of the HUD, you'll see an extra line item on there that'll say assignment fee, paid to blank. That's where my assignment fee is disclosed. And if I'm upfront with my buyer already knows how much money I'm making. Okay? All right? So, now, if I do double close on it, I now owned that property. It's mine. It may have only been mine for 15 minutes, but it was my property. You need to talk with your CPAs about this. I do not want to get into that side of it, but you can start becoming what's called a dealer. When you start becoming classified as a dealer with the IRS, then your taxes change. This only affects you if you're double closing. Anytime you buy and sell real estate, if you move through X amount of transactions, you might be considered by the IRS a dealer. And it really depends from property to property. I'm not going to talk to you about that in too much detail because why? I have CPAs that do that. I just need you to be aware that this is a possibility and it might change up how you're taxed. Okay? So now, alternatively, taking it down. I don't know if I've talked through this. Let me just move through here. See what all I talk about in here. Oh, wow, I get in here. All right, so alternatively, and I might talk about this further down, I've got an assignment of contract, I've got a double close, and a third option that I would do, especially in a hot seller's market, just go ahead and take it down. If you have the ability to do so, take the property down. If you've got a really good profit on it, the best option for that property likely to get it sold and sold for top dollar straight to the MLS. If you've done your due diligence on it right and you've got a fairly fat spread, go ahead and take it down even if you have to use a hard money lender to do so and take it straight to the MLS. It's going to increase your profit significantly. Most often, you'll be able to get more out of the MLS than you would out of your own buyer's list. It's just the way the market is when you're in a heavy seller's market. I had one property, and this is a legitimate transaction. Legitimate transaction, the numbers are confused in my head. But I bought the house for somewhere around 30 to 40 grand. I was anticipating in its completely remodeled condition to sell for about 140. It needed probably around $65,000 to $70,000 worth of work. So I would have been all into that property for about 100 grand, ability to resell for 140, about a $40,000 gross profit margin attached to that property. Not a bad day, not a great day, but it was a day. I took that exact same property and stuck it on the MLS for $99,000 and sold it for $105,000. There was never a day in the world I thought that house would have ever sold for $105,000. I clearly saw $70,000 worth of work that needed to be done to that. The all in on that was $175,000, $180,000 for a property that would only be worth 140 grand. What you must start learning is that not everybody has the same investment strategy as you do. I personally like to have equity in all of my transactions outside of possibly a subject to wrap. I want equity. I like to buy equity in my transaction. What did that end buyer do with that property? They made absolutely no true improvements to it at all, maybe put $15,000 worth of work into it, and then turned it into a rental. Now they were into that rental for maybe 120 grand, and they're renting it for $1,200 a month. When you look at it from that standpoint, it may have not been the greatest of investments in my opinion, but it worked for them. So one of the key things to becoming a proficient wholesaler is understanding your end buyer market. What are my end buyers looking to do? Okay? So I get this often and I get this a lot. How do I build my buyers list? How do I build my buyers list? How do I build my buyers list? And there's really two sides to this coin that the wholesaling community will argue about. One side will say, you get a good contract, you don't need a buyers list. The other side will say, you get a good buyers list, you'll get more contracts. And I agree with both sides. If you get a good contract, you'll sell it all day long. You don't need a buyer's list, it'll get sold. But what about those properties where, you know what, they are thin, they aren't looking all that great? Having a solid buyer's list is where you're able to perform on those types of deals. So it is important to have both sides of the coin. Having a solid buyer's list is important, but more so important than that is getting a contract. But knowing what your buyers are willing to buy is important to getting more contracts. Because if I'm constantly trying to hit 70-cent deals off of my marketing, my contracts will be limited. You can still get 70-cent deals. They're not common. So if I have a better understanding of what my market will spend, then I'll have a better understanding of how to contract it. Now, would y'all like to know a little hack to kind of figuring that out without already having your buyers in line? Okay, and this is not foolproof, but this is just some insight as to how I navigated my way through as a rookie wholesaler. When I started wholesaling, it was about 2011, 2012. I started investing about 2006. I was flipping from 2006 to 2011, 12. I didn't start wholesaling until I was already flipping for 5 to 6 years. Did not understand wholesaling. I bought from wholesalers, but did not understand it at all. Here's how I would figure out what to contract my properties for. I would get on the buyer's list of the best wholesalers I could find in town. 2011, 2012, we didn't have Facebook groups. We only had like 3 REIAs in town. And the community was nowhere near as strong as it is right now. So my resources for advice and mentorship were non-existent. What I had to do is get on the buyer's list of as many of the top wholesalers I could find. At that time, it was Homewood Properties, which is Randy Quay. It was Brian Jordan, an expat from New Western. And it was John Susi at All Wholesale Properties. And it was New Western and Net Worth. I'd get on those buyers lists and I could start seeing what types of properties they were pumping out and what they were marketing them for. I would then follow those properties and I'd start contacting the wholesalers and saying, hey, has that property sold? Hey, has that property sold? Damn it, I missed it. What was I trying to figure out? How much they were able to move their properties for. And then I, through my own due diligence, can kind of figure out, they just moved that property for 88 cents on the dollar. They just moved that one for 82 cents on the dollar. All right, anything above 400 grand, they're getting around 78 cents on the dollar. Okay, Garland and Mesquite, they're getting at about 83 cents on the dollar. Okay, I now kind of know a backwards way of figuring out what margins people are moving properties at. Well, I now know if these companies can move Garland at 84 cents on the dollar, then maybe when I'm on my contracts, I should start being willing to maybe offer up to 76 to 78 cents on the dollar. That leaves a 6-cent spread, and that gives enough for me to co-wholesale with them if I have to. What do I mean by co-wholesale? I will talk to them and say, hey, you've got a buyer, I've got a contract, let's split the profit. That is how I operated in my business for the first couple years. I co-wholesaled a lot of properties with experienced wholesalers so that way they could help me move properties at margins that I couldn't have moved them at. I could have stayed a lone island and just said, you know what? I'm going to go out here and I'm just going to contract what I can contract and sell it to who I can sell it for. But there would have been a lot of deals I couldn't have moved, and there would have been a lot of money lost because I had that scarcity mindset of it's all me. The better we get at learning and adopting an abundance mindset of understanding that it's a we, not me world, we will succeed further and faster. Without teams, I would never have made it to where I'm at today. Building a buyer's list. 100 new buyers a week. Facebook forum search will probably get you 1,000 right out the gate. If you go into your local Facebook forums for real estate investors and then just Google that forum for @gmail.com, you will see post after post after post of people saying, I've got a property in blank, blank, blank. If you're interested, drop an email below. If you're interested, drop an email below. If you're interested, drop an email below. You can build 1,000 emails out real fast like that. We were touching base on that yesterday, talking about it. Jay Coleman, I believe, said he'd go back through, and instead of just taking their email, he'd check out their profile and see if it seemed like they were doing some real estate business, because a lot of those emails are just going to be other wholesalers that are looking to daisy chain. Well, if I can look at their profile, I can see them at their rehab, well, I kind of figure out that they're probably a true, legitimate buyer. I will start adding all of those people to my buyer's list, okay? Attend all REIAs. If you have not already done so, there's probably about 40 people in this room you could have networked with. I know that we've got some people here flipping. We've got some other people here flipping. These are all people that could be networked with and you can do business with. We had a panel of people up here yesterday that would have all likely have been a buyer of yours. And I'd be willing to bet most people did not get their contact information. This is a networking business. I know you did. You're a pro. So with that to be said, though, this is a networking business.
January 14th at DFW, Propelio event in Houston, January 21st.
Yeah, we have 2 Propelio events coming up soon. We have one here in DFW. Anticipate between 300 to 600 people showing up. We've got another one down in Houston. Anticipate another 150 to 300 people showing up there. The networking that was a surprise for me. I got in 2006. I personally am an introvert. I don't like dealing with people. I don't like associating with people. A lot of people in this room may have got that vibe from me, and it's not because I don't like you. I just get really scared as hell talking to people. Like, people wouldn't understand that. Like, I have an immense fear of talking to people. Standing up here at the front of the room is cool because no one's talking to me. But whenever I have to have a private conversation with somebody, so it's like I start crumbling inside. It's like, get me out of here. Like, I don't know why. It's just kind of a quirk that I'm trying to figure my way through. That to be said, though, I loved getting into real estate in 2006 because I was remodeling a bunch of houses. I was GCing all the contracts myself. I was out there swinging a hammer. I felt like I was on a job site. I'm used to a job site. I was on a job site from the time I was 13 until I was about 27. I was comfortable in that place. When I started trying to wholesale and expand and build my business, I quickly realized the only way to truly build big in this, in my opinion, is a solid network. The better your network is in this business, the better you will transact. And I had to start forcing myself to get out of my comfort zone. I can promise you, the first time I stood in front of a room and started talking, holy crap. Like, I almost passed out because I forgot to breathe. This is not a natural state for me. This open form of communication, not a natural state for me. This is really, like y'all, a lot of y'all have probably seen Propelio TV. You can ask Mr. Harper. The first time he tried putting me on a camera, I was mother effing the world. And that's not a joke. Like, we're in a complex. Like, I'm sure that 4 or 5 neighbors down, they heard me, motherfucker, this shit.
Did you say was?
I still am. I still am. Like, there will be days where I show up to get on TV or whatever we want to call it, YouTube, and I don't want to do it. And y'all are probably watching being like, man, it's just kind of a dry show today. It's because, like, I'm just up there collapsing. I'm like, just like, let me out of this place. So all that to be said, you need to get out to these REIAs. And more so than just going to the REIA, you need to network. You don't just go up there and find your best friend. Hey, let's chill tonight. That did you no good. That wasn't a time to hang out. This is business operations. You needed to be finding. There's private capital at these events. There's wholesalers at these events. There's flippers at these events, landlords at these events, insurance companies. You need to work the room. Everybody in that room needs to know who you are, and you need to know everybody in that room. And by doing that, you're going to be able to expand your network quickly. We're going to talk about co-wholesales later today, and I would like to go ahead and talk and put that on. So I don't want to jump around too fast. Let me think. Co-wholesaling. I'm gonna go ahead and say it right now. If we talk about it again, who cares? This is how I'd operate if I was you right now. I would show up to every REIA every night of the week, all week long. And I would meet every single person in the room. And there's 3 things I'm wanting to find out. Are you currently wholesaling? Yes. Okay, how many deals have you done? 0 to none. okay, or 0 to 100, it doesn't matter, but I'm gonna figure all this out. I'm gonna document it. Do you mind if I get your contact information? All right, they're gonna go in the wholesaler column, and then there'll be a column next to it saying how many transactions they've done, and then I'll have their contact information. All right, I'm gonna look for other people as well. Okay, you're a landlord. What type of properties are you looking to buy? What areas are you looking to buy in? Can I have your contact information? I move properties just like that. So in my notes, I've already got a long list of wholesalers. I've got a long list of landlords. Who else might I find? Flippers. Okay, you're a flipper. What type of properties are you looking for? What area are you looking to buy in? Do you mind if I contact you? Okay? If everybody in this room did that, you should have at least 30 to 50 phone numbers in your book right now. My job from that point moving forward is every single night I do that, within a month I've probably got around 700 to 1,000 people that I can contact that are actively participating in this community. What am I going to now do? Every new wholesaler that's out there, I am going to put on an RVM or a voice blast or something like that, and I'm going to hit them up. And I'm going to constantly see if they've got deals to move. And if they want to JV on them, I'll JV the deal. That's how I'd operate right now. Like, I don't know what else to say on that side. That's how I would operate right now. I would JV a ton of deals, and then I would do my own deals as I got through them. So moving forward, go section8.com. Great way to find more landlords. Local Section 8 office, you can get a full list of them. For rent ads. It's a good way to find landlords. I'd call everybody with a for rent ad and I'd say, hey, are you interested in buying more properties? Hell no, I'm trying to get rid of the one I got. Okay, I'll buy it. You know, just call them all up. Title companies. Most title companies will tell you who their good buyers are. You know why? Because they're going to close with them. CashBuyersPlus.com is a resource for finding them. Hard money lenders will also tell you who the buyers are. Why? Because the lender will get the points. Let's get a mic over here.
I was just wondering if Connected Investors, you heard of that place?
I've not.
Okay, it's kind of like I'm gonna say like a Facebook for real estate.
Okay.
And it's like wholesalers, buyers, lenders. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah.
Okay, so Connected Investors might be an alternate resource. I haven't heard of it before, but anywhere you can go where you're finding a congregation of people looking to buy real estate is a great resource. So alternative options is list swaps. At the point in time, let's say you've got 3,000 or 4,000 emails. Well, if I've got 3,000 or 4,000 emails and you've got 3,000 or 4,000 emails, we might be able to collaborate and say, I'll give you 3,000 emails for 3,000 emails. I give you 3,000, you give me 3,000 back. Maybe there was 1,500 doubles. Well, I just added 1,500 more emails to my list. Now I've got 4,500, 5,500, 5,500. I got 5,500 emails. Would you like to do a list swap? And a lot of times you'll see bigger wholesalers will do list swaps. Okay? Is this a we, not me community? Yes. Okay? That's how I'd start building my buyers list. Marketing the property for sale. Okay? Some things that I would do is I'd look through my tax records for any cash buyers local to my zip code. Yes?
Yeah, I have a question concerning JV deals.
Mm-hmm.
When JVing, as a wholesaler, when you have a second deal, would it be unethical to get the cash buyer from that first deal?
I hear what you said. So what he's asking is, if I JV a deal with somebody and that person brings a buyer to buy that property, and then I find another deal in the future, is it unethical for me to go back to that original buyer? Now, on my side, I would say yes, but I always work my JV deals. Whenever I upfront talk to them, I'm like, if you bring a buyer to this table and I'm paying you for that, I have the rights to market back to that buyer again. And because the reason I did that is because one of the very first deals I did was a hood property over there in North Side. I contracted it for like $7,000 and flipped it for 22. And a guy, I co-wholesaled it with a guy and he brought me a buyer. And whenever everything was said and done with, I found another one in North Side And I called back the original wholesaler out of respect, and because you want to keep your reputation in this business. You don't want to burn bridges. I called the original guy back and I was like, hey, I've got another one in Northside. I just wanted to confirm with you, is it cool for me to go back to the guy that bought the other one? And he was like, no. And I was like, well, that's kind of crappy because I paid you like $7,000 on the last transaction. Like, right. How much more money did you want out of it? And they're like, no, we're not doing it. I was like, all right, well, how about this? I will co-wholesale this one with you. But from now on, if I ever co-wholesale a deal with you, that buyer is now my buyer for the future. Because my goal is not to JV with you on every deal moving forward. I've got to survive in this business too. So me paying you $7,000 for one contact doesn't seem outrageous. So I would make sure up front that I disclose that, like, hey, if we co-wholesale this together, the buyer's mine. And if you don't agree with that, I'll find somebody else to co-wholesale with.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Tax records. So one of the key ways that I moved through my transactions was I would want to find landlords. I didn't really like flipping to buyers, or I didn't really like flipping to rehabbers because they wanted steeper discounts. Now, when you start moving up into the higher price point homes, you're not going to get landlords that are buying $1 million properties. But what I could find is around that $100,000 to that $300,000 price point, there are a lot of landlords. So if I get something contracted in that price point, I would look at public record and I'd try to find everybody that is within the last 2 years bought a property within a couple of miles of my subject property for cash. I now know everybody in that area that has purchased properties for cash and like to work in that area. I would skip trace and call them. Or I would send them a marketing letter with a picture of the house, a kind of like a sales letter of what the property looks like, and I'd mail them all out to all cash buyers or skip and call them. That right there was a great resource for me finding buyers for those properties. That was probably my number one resource for finding those people. Behind that, my second best resource was a bandit sign. I would drop bandit signs all around that area. 322, worth 150 grand, sale 70. You'll get a lot of BS calls out of it. You'll get a lot of BS calls out of it, but those BS calls were often other wholesalers, contractors, etc. But that's just adding to my networking list. It's all right, you're a wholesaler. Let me get your contact information. How many deals have you done? Opportunity right there. And then for everybody else, a lot of people just say, hey, I don't really buy in that area, but I am a buyer. Please put me on your list. Okay, well, what are you looking for? Keep adding to those contacts. But bandit signs would help me dispo a lot of properties. Facebook forums nowadays. We still have to be careful though, and it's sad the environment that we're in, but people are willing to circumvent your contract. You know, they just are. So a lot of the times when we do go into Facebook forums, we don't openly disclose the address. We'll just say what subdivision, what city, and what the asking price is, and the basic information about the property. And then anybody that does want the physical address, you need to vet them a little better. You know, hey, show me a proof of funds, show me a couple HUDs, show me that you've actually bought some real estate. You know, that's not a foolproof way of vetting somebody, but it does help you weed out all of the people that are potentially trying to circumvent the contract. Craigslist, this is way back in the day. I'm much older now, but Craigslist is still viable to a different demographic. If all we're focusing on is social media platforms that we're used to, we're ignoring a demographic of people that might not be jumping on social media. So Craigslist is where I dispoed quite a few properties. I remember one in particular, I wasn't necessarily excited about contracting it because I wasn't certain if I'd be able to sell it. It was out in Keene, Texas. It was 5 acres with a 3-bed, 2-bath, no garage, new build that was to the studs. All the copper had been stolen out of it, but it was a new build, but it needed the drywall finished out and all the finishing out from the studs on. It had roof, windows, and exterior siding, dried in, and I contracted it for like 30 grand. And I wasn't 100% certain because I had no comps out there at all. I wasn't sure what I was going to be able to do with it. So I just threw it on Craigslist, and I wrote an ad in English, and I wrote an ad in Spanish. I had a Hispanic buyer buy the house for 60 grand. So boom, I just made 30 grand. I wasn't confident in it, but I sold it on Craigslist. So I would market everywhere. And especially on lower price point homes, anything that's sub 100 grand, I would most definitely write the ad in English and Spanish. And we can talk about that here for just a moment. I don't know where I go on some of these slides because I haven't studied them before coming up here. Another alternative strategy that I did that was taught to me by John Susi was I would wholesale my properties to the owner occupants. So when you're working in lower price point homes, mostly sub 70 grand, the Hispanic community is very often a cash community. They save all of their funds, and they'll show up in a 30-year-old car that's worth about $800, and they'll have a sack with $80,000 in it. They are a cash community. So whenever I would work in a predominantly Hispanic market where I found a lower price point home, I would contract that, and then I would drop bandit signs all around there, and I'd write in Spanish, se vende casa, 50 grand, 60 grand, 70 grand. And you would see a line of people show up to that house with cash in their hands to buy it. They are very much a family community. They want to live next to grandma, brother, uncle, cousin, sister. They want to be around each other. And if they've got a cousin or a sister or a mother or a brother that lives down the street, they're buying that house. So I would start to transact a lot of my lower income homes in Spanish. And I'd sell a lot more of them off to a price that would not necessarily be an investor price. It would be a price where somebody's like, I don't care how much it takes to fix that house. I'm going to do it myself, and I want to live next door to my friends. So often, that is how I transact those types of deals. Okay? Section 8, text buyers, emailing it out, texting. I find that texting buyers is a little better now than emailing buyers. Email has kind of gone to the wayside, but if you text people, it tends to work out better. Email hedge funds. If you can get in contact with hedge funds, find out what their buying criteria is, how they expect the transaction to be structured. They can often pay you more than other people will. iBuyers. I've never moved a property to an iBuyer. That's a new way of going, so I'm not here to teach you about that. Hard money lenders will often market your property for you as well. People don't even think about that. You call up 10 of the highest, biggest hard money lenders in town and say, hey, I've got a property that I need to move. Can you help me move it? I dispoed a ton of properties through hard money lenders. Ton of them. Real estate agents. There are some real estate agents in town that specialize in discount property. They've got a solid resource. They're going to want their fees. When they want their fees, what I'll tell them is like, this is my price. Put your fee on top of it. And they'll often move it. Title companies. Title companies know who's closing. They know exactly who's closing. So I'll work with the title company at times. But my best ones were the tax records, bandit signs, and hard money lenders. That's how I disposed a lot of my property. Here's what I was just talking about. Owner-occupied buyers. Not everything I moved has to go to an investor. Not everything I move has to go to an investor. I remember seeing this happen one time. Remember that property I told y'all earlier I picked up for like 40 grand? I stuck it on the MLS for 99, sold it for 105. At the exact same time I was going after that property, I saw an abandoned property right down the street that looked trashed out. So I started researching that one since I was in the neighborhood, and I found out it was a bank property. I also found out that it was getting put out at auction. So not auction like state auction. It was an REO, but they were going to put it out on a website auction. I forgot what it was, HUD.gov or whatever that ends up being. Well, they run the auction there. I was like, all right, I'll go ahead and jump on that one too. And I started bidding on that auction to try and get that property. And I lost it. And the person that bought it paid like 120 grand for it. And the damn thing was damn near a teardown. I'm like, what the hell? It ended up being a Hispanic family that purchased it. And within like 4 months, they completely rebuilt the house. And when I mean completely rebuilt the house, I'm not joking 1 cent. They took the roof off of the house. And when I mean they took the roof off the house, I'm not talking about the shingles. They took the roof off of the house. They took the rafters off. They took the decking off. There was zero roof on that house anymore. They reframed the house. They made the framing of the house a totally different home. They completely redid the inside of it and changed up the framing on the inside of the home. They built a detached 2-car garage, rebuilt the 2-car garage that was attached to it, and it was a brand damn new home within like 3 months. Why did they pay 120 grand for it? Because they had 120 grand, it was a neighborhood that they wanted to live in, and they didn't care how much it was going to cost to fix it. They wanted it. It's different. So you just got to understand who your buyers are. We talked about co-wholesaling earlier. What do I mean by co-wholesaling? Co-wholesaling is whatever, like we JV. It's like you're a wholesaler, I'm a wholesaler, you've got a deal, I've got a buyer, let's work together. That's kind of a co-wholesale. I don't want that to be distracted by the word daisy chain. Daisy chain and co-wholesaling is not the same thing. And what do I mean by daisy chaining? Daisy chaining is I got a property under contract and I'm trying to move it. I send an email out and somebody sees that email and they're like, I could probably get more for that property than that. They add their price to it and they start marketing your property without your permission. Did I give them permission to market that property? No. Did they care? No. What are they trying to do? They're hoping that their buyer's list is better than mine. I'm advertising it for 60. They advertise it for 65. Once they find somebody that's willing to lock it up at 65, they try to lock it up with me at 60 and they make $5,000 in between. That's illegal. It's illegal. It's not even like unethical. It's illegal. They are marketing a property that they do not have under contract. They are acting as a real estate agent. They do not have the rights to do that. They have no equitable interest in that property at all. None. So A, it's illegal. B, it's unethical. And C, we don't like people that do that in our community. So if you truly think you've got a buyer for that property, call them up. Say, hey, you're marketing it for $60,000. Do you mind if I find a buyer for 65 if I keep the 5 in between? Most people are going to say, go for it. You know, it's not wrong to call somebody up and be like, hey, if I brought a buyer in for 65, you want 64, can I keep the 5 in the middle? Most wholesalers will be like, yeah, fine, go for it. Sometimes they'll say no. That's on them. But up front, you've got their permission to market the property. You put together a little JV agreement. It's a simple little one piece of paper. It says, hey, you've got the property for 60. If I can get anything more than 60, I get to keep the difference. I now have contract. I've got some equitable interest there. I can now market the property. Okay, co-wholesaling is just simply you working with another wholesaler to get the deal done. I really do recommend for anybody that is fresh in this business to do stuff like that. Jason, here in the back, I believe that he's willing to co-wholesale all day long. He's done plenty enough deals to know what he's doing. He's great at acquisitions. We've got plenty of people that would be willing to wholesale with you, co-wholesale with you. Like, I know Edwin, you and Ace and a couple of other people work on deals all the time. Be willing to work with other people. Okay?
Got a question.
You co-wholesale, Justin? Raise your hand if you're willing to co-wholesale. Start networking. Yes, sir.
What's the fine line as a newbie investor? You talk to the initial wholesaler who got the contract. They tell you, because I've had that. I've had that conversation. We'll just add what you want on the deal, and then you start marketing.
Yes, sir.
Everybody has, say, similar buyers on their list. A buyer says, hey, Jason, I got this other investor out here that's marketing a property that I saw you already emailed to me, and they're not aware of the situation. Doesn't that put me in a bad light or potentially?
So the way this would save you is finding out who's got the contract and asking permission. At the point in time you ask permission, anybody that calls them just be like, yeah, I told him he could market it, and if he was able to get more than what I was asking for it, then he could keep the fee in between. It does become unfortunate, when we do have our buyers lists that are cross-performing, but ultimately, if I'm looking at my inbox and I see the same property for 60 and one for 65, I'm calling the person that's marketing it for 60. And I'll call them up and go, hey, I know somebody else is blasting out your property. Yeah, I told a couple people they could blast it out, but I mean, if they get more for it than I can, then great. If not, you know what? I'm marketing it for 60. If you want to buy it for 60, I got it for 60. There's two ways of looking at that. I think I've got a whole class on co-wholesaling involved in this, so I don't want to get too much deeper into it. But whenever I co-wholesale a deal, I need to come to terms with the person I'm partnering with. Are you A, wanting 60 and anything above that I can get? Or B, can I market it at 60? What do you have the property under contract for? We'll split the profit up 50-50, 30-60, 30-70, whatever. There's nothing written in stone as to how that profit has to get tallied up or divided up. And then other things to consider when I'm co-wholesaling is an exclusive right to co-wholesale. Like, let's say you're marketing a property for 60, and I know for a fact that I can probably get it moved for 68, but I'm not going to waste my time and compete with 900 other people. I'll call you up and say, hey, I can move it for 68, but I want an exclusive right to do it, and I want 72 hours to get it done. It's up to you at that point in time to say, you know what, I'll give this person 72 hours to try and move it for 68. I was trying to move it for 60 for 4 days and couldn't do it. You know what? I'll give you an exclusive right. I personally don't like giving people an exclusive right to market my property, but at the same time, if I'm struggling to move a property and they feel confident that they can, I might just give it a shot. You know, I always try to ask for a non-exclusive right. Okay? So any questions on that? All right, moving forward. Showings. When I'm doing dispo on showings, we've got a couple of things to look at. Owner-occupied showings, vacant properties, mass showings, silent auctions. Owner-occupied properties, when you're trying to show them, your seller should already be prepared for the fact that you're going to bring in potential capital partners, other investors to partner on the deal with. And if they're aware of that up front, asking for a showing to bring in 7 or 8 people should not be outside of the norm. Now, if you're trying to do this without their knowledge, it's going to start getting a little awkward. You know, hey, can I get in the house? Can you not be there? You know, hell, it's my house. All my stuff's still there. It starts getting awkward. But I do up front tell my seller, please do not communicate with my investors. And I tell my investors, please do not communicate with my seller. Okay? I'll try and schedule a time that's convenient for the seller. I'll try and schedule a time where I know I can probably get the most buyers in. I'll try and do it like a weekend, like a Saturday, early morning, not early morning, but like 9, 10, 11 a.m. Most people, a lot of people flipping are doing it on the sides. They still have their 9 to 5 jobs, so if I can make it convenient on a weekend, I'll set my showing for, let's say, 11 a.m. on Saturday, and I'll be marketing this property for a full 7 or 8 days beforehand. We'll be marketing. Hey, the day before the showing, I'll text everybody that said they were coming, remind them, tomorrow, 11 a.m. If you want to lock this up, I suggest you being prepared by coming with a cashier's check. I'll notify them up front, like, if you're really interested in taking a look at this, even if you don't buy it, you know, I'll have 5 or 6 people there with a cashier's check. The first person that puts that cashier's check in my hand gets it. So if you really are interested in this, go ahead and take the time to get your cashier's check up front. Okay? If it's a vacant property, it's a lot easier. Things get so much easier to show a vacant property, especially if it's a trashed out vacant property. I'll put a lockbox on it, and a lot of times I'll kind of do like a go and show with it. Just be like, hey, text me. A lot of times I'll know who my buyers are, but in the event I don't, I'll be like, you know, text me your ID, and, you know, go take a look at it. Lockbox combo is blank, 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 blank. Please put the key back in the box when it's done. Now, what a lot of the times I'll find is if they go over there and they like it, the key disappears, and it sucks. So I always try to make at least two keys, and I'll hide another one at the house somewhere, so that way in the event that the key does get disappeared, I can show up and replace it easily. But on vacants, a lot of times I'll just do go-on shows. Sometimes I will also do a mass showing just so I can start creating a buzz and get people motivated to move it. And it's kind of like, what I'm talking about by mass showings is I want everybody to show up at the same time. It kind of creates a bit of a buyer's frenzy. There's 2 ways of doing it. With a mass showing, I can start saying, well, you know what? It's a silent auction. Give me your highest and best. And that might get you more than you're asking. Let's say I'm asking $60 for it and somebody does offer me $68 for it. I just made an extra $8,000. I have never really done the silent auction side. I don't particularly care for it. My goal is to make sure that I get the property closed. And my goal is to make sure that I get it closed fast. So what I would do is instead of incentivizing people to go into a silent auction, I'd just tell everybody the first person that gets a check in my hand gets the deal. It's 60 grand, it's not 61, it's not 62, it's not 65. It's 60 grand and the first person, I've got a check in my hand all of a sudden. Like people start handing over this, they're done. They don't need to hear anymore. So I'd much rather, instead of trying to get into the bidding war where people are like 68, 67, then people start getting discouraged, start wanting to close. You know what? It's 60. The first person that gets me the money that I want, it's got it. Make sense? Cool. So silent auctions, I don't like doing them. I just don't. I know a lot of people do. Qualifying the buyer. Okay? One of the first and biggest qualifiers for me, especially if I'm not making a huge spread. Let's say I'm making like a sub $10,000 spread, and I got a $5,000 non-refundable deposit in my pocket. Most people, $5,000 means something to them. That deposit's a pretty good qualifier for me up front. But beyond that deposit, I am going to ask, who is your lender? Are you using personal cash? If so, show me proof of funds. And I'm not talking about like a BS statement from the bank saying, oh, he's pre-approved for blank, blank, blank. No. I want to see, like pull open your phone. Show me proof of funds. Okay? All right, you are going to use a lender. Let's hop on a real quick call with this lender and say, hey, this is the property, these are the numbers. What kind of money does he need in reserves? Do you have that in reserves? Yes? No? No? Oops. Try and figure out up front, have you ever closed any deals? Yeah? Show me some HUDs. Beyond that, really the biggest thing, like I'm 70% in once I get that $5,000 check. Like I'm almost done. Now, if I start having a much bigger spread where like I might have a $15,000 to $20,000, $25,000 spread, if that person fails to perform, I've got 20 grand that I'm potentially losing on that. How do I handle that? I try not to get too concerned about will the buyer close. I know it's important, but I try not to get too concerned with it. The thing that I want to know is, did I get their 5 grand? And does their lender feel confident with them? If I get those two even remotely close up front, I'm good on that. All of my assignments clearly state one other thing though. I am allowed to market for a backup buyer. If I do have a $25,000 spread on that property, then I've probably got a pretty good deal going. It shouldn't be too hard for me to find a backup buyer. I'll get it locked up with a backup buyer, and now just in case the primary buyer fails, I've already got the deal moved, and I made an extra 5 grand in the process. Do I feel bad about holding $5,000 in non-refundable deposit because somebody else failed to perform upon their obligations? I do not. That is a lesson that they needed to learn. This business is real. Now, there have been times where I'll collect someone's non-refundable deposit and they fail to close, and I am able to sell it to somebody else, and I will refund the difference between, like half of the difference between what I made on it and what they lost. You know, my goal isn't to burn you, but at the exact same time, you kind of screwed my game up. If you did not perform and I was unable to find another buyer, I may have just burned my entire deal. I'm depending upon you for my payday. I worked 3 months and spent $12,000 in marketing to get this one deal. While it showed me making $18,000, my net on it was $6,000. I made $2,000 a month, and because you failed to perform, because you were not getting your documents to your lender on time, I lost my payday. Do y'all see why I don't feel bad about holding that deposit? While some people might say that it's wrong, it's not. It was very clearly written, non-refundable. I had title clear to close. We were ready to close. You failed to perform. I am keeping the cash. Okay? Collecting the deposit. I don't recommend using Square. I would not recommend using Square. Yes, Jocelyn? Ooh, that's fun. So she just asked, how would I feel about an end buyer trying to renegotiate the purchase price at the closing table? I would blow the F up. I would. So 2 things about my assignment contract. 1, I have the right to pull a backup, and I almost always try to make sure I've got a backup unless it's a repeat buyer that I've worked with before. And B, they did not get more than 10 days to close. So like if I got my contract for a 45-day close, they don't get 45 days to close. I give them a 10-day assignment contract. They have 10 days to perform, and at the end of 10 days, if they have not performed, the contract reverts back to me with no further obligations of either party, and the non-refundable deposit is retained by me. So that is one way I protect myself. So if he does get to the closing table, I'll just be like, good job. I'll keep 5 grand and I'll sell it to somebody else. What? You don't want to lose 5 grand? You're losing it right now, because if you ask me one more time to drop my price, I'm not even going to talk with you about it. I'm going to walk out, and if title doesn't wire me my money by the end of the day, I've already got it sold to somebody else. I know it's rough like that, but you will find people around here that are BSing you. They're like they'll contract it right up front, knowing that, you know what, you're hungry for money, and that it's the only deal you've pulled off in 2 months, 3 months, and they've got a decent deal, but they're just trying to get more out of it than they can, so they shaft you, leaving you making $2 grand while they go off and make 35. It's like, I ain't doing that game with you. It is. You will find sharks in the business that are just out there to just screw over as many people as they can. They're not worried about repeat business. While I seem like I might be tough on people at times, I'm disclosing everything from beginning to end. I'm not contracting with you and then at the end saying, I'm changing my mind. It's like, we agreed on this. You're either doing it or you're not. It's in my opinion, it's like when you're disciplining your kids. It's like you tell them, no, you can't have the ice cream. And then 20 minutes later, you give them the ice cream. You know, you kind of got to set the rules up front and then hold to them. If you don't hold to the rules, they'll just learn to keep breaking them. You lose a $5,000 deposit enough times, you stick to the rules. Contracting the buyer. With an assignment of contract, it's pretty straightforward. It needs to define all the parties. It needs to discuss the non-refundable deposit. You need to define a close date. Acknowledge communications. I'm going to stop on this one for just a minute. I'm going to stop on define a close date too. What did I mean by define a close date? Like I said earlier, I've got 45 days on my purchase agreement to perform. I never in my right mind want to give my end buyer the opportunity to expire my contract. This is a strategy I have seen other people do, and that's why I talk about this. I will see end buyers contract your property, and they'll read your assignment agreement knowing that you do not have a solid assignment agreement. Through their conversations with you, they'll realize that you're not very experienced, and they'll just burn your contract. They'll just sit on it, sit on it, sit on it, sit on it, and sit on it, and wait for it to expire, and then contract it behind you. I have seen it happen way too many times. I had a girl last year call me up in tears, like she was counting on this. This was a huge win for her. It was going to get her out of the hole. And the BS buyer that put her on contract was trying to play games with her. And I ended up getting on the phone with her and the end buyer, and I was like, if you were trying to burn this contract, guess what? I will sit down with this lady right here next to me. I will go out there tonight, and I will have it contracted and closed tomorrow morning, and I guarantee you I'll beat you to the table to do it. And guess what he did on that last day? Because we had like 24 hours left in the contract. He finally performed. He got to the point where he's ignoring all of our phone calls. The way we got him on the phone was I was the one that called him. Because it was a sweet deal. He was going to make a ton of money on that property at her price point. But he got greedy. He saw that she was going to be making about 25 grand and was like, well, I might be able to get 25 grand out of it too. You got to be careful with who you're doing business with. It sucks to say that, but it's real. Acknowledge communications. Acknowledge communications. At no point in time do I ever want my end buyer talking to the seller. Ever. It is written into my assignment contract as a extreme violation of the contract that if they circumvent me in communications with the seller, the assignment contract is automatically null and void, the non-refundable deposit will not be repaid, and you will lose the contract if you talk to my seller. It is not acceptable. All communication goes through me. Why is that? I don't want this end buyer calling the seller and be like, I noticed the faucet was leaking on the front of the house. Are you going to fix that before I buy it? No. You will be surprised what that buyer will call up and tell that seller. There is no point in time where that end buyer is allowed to talk to that seller unless they're talking through me. And I disclose that in my assignment of contract because I have deals blow up on me over this. The reason I do these types of things is my experience has told me I need this stuff in my contract. Express equitable position. This assignment of contract needs to clearly state that I am not selling real estate, I am selling the contract. And all obligations of the original contract must be upheld. Address access and repairs. They're not supposed to go over there and start demoing that house before they buy it. I had that happen once. Well, I had an extra crew ready. I know we're closing on Monday. Well, fuck you. I don't care. Friday, you didn't own the house. That doesn't mean you get to go in there and rip out all the cabinets and start ripping down walls. You did not own it until Monday. I now have a seller screaming at me because all of the kitchen cabinets are in the front yard. What in the hell makes you think you had the right to go do that? That makes sense? It happens. So when I start talking about these things, there's reasons why I put these things in my contract because I've already had to deal with the problem once in my life. I don't like dealing with the same problem twice. Performance clauses. Yes, ma'am. Let's get a microphone over. Microphone. Thank you, sir.
I had a situation where I bought a home through Wholesale, and we signed everything. We're about to close, but then it wasn't me, but it was the owner of the house who ripped out the custom cabinets and the island, which were really nice. I was planning just to keep them, repaint them, just touch them up. He ripped them out and he said he donated to the church. And that all of a sudden kind of like, and that's that house that I talked about yesterday.
That cost you an extra
has
15 grand.
Exactly. So what do you do with that?
What I would need to do with that is talk with the wholesaler and say either A, you get the price dropped by 15 grand, or give me my money back. It's not in the condition it was in whenever I contracted it. Yep. I'm not going to take a $15,000 loss on that. When I contracted that property, there was a functional kitchen there. It's disappeared. So either give me my money back or get a 15K price drop. Right behind you.
So I had a similar situation happened with when I first started out, where I bought from one of those big wholesalers, and they wouldn't let me get my contractor in to price out and all that. And
I wonder
I was
why.
naive. I took it, and the seller was pissed off at the wholesaler because some other buyers went and disclosed the prices and all that. But then when I was finally ready to close, I see that seller is not moving out. And also a lot of high-end landscapings and things were disappearing.
Yep.
So I could have stopped closing and demand my
It really
deposit
depends
back.
upon your contract. That really depends upon your contract. Like what I'm saying with her and what I'd say with you is it really depends upon the contract. But my contract and any contract should really state that the real estate is being transferred in the condition that it was contracted in. Like let's just say like the TREC, it clearly states inside of the TREC contract that the property will transfer in its present condition minus any normal wear and tear. Well, you know, all the kitchen cabinets missing is not normal wear and tear. So I'm not closing on the property. The cabinets are missing. We need to renegotiate the price. Now, if you have a wholesaler that's sitting in the middle being like, no, F you, I'm keeping your deposit, and I'll be like, no, F you, the cabinets are gone. All the landscaping is gone. All these high-end fixtures that were here are gone. You need to give me my money back or get me an equivalent discount. And if they're not willing to do that, it's unfortunate that many people are not in the position to enforce it through litigation, but that is why there are certain companies in town where I say do not do business with them. It's because they're notorious for doing it. I would have already been willing to guess exactly who y'all are operating with. So everybody that's watching right now, you've got two people sitting in the room that have both given similar stories. It's not uncommon business practice for them. And while I might be stiff in my business and I don't give a lot of leeway, I'm open and honest in mine.
Not only that, both of them, both the big ones, they have ownership interest in their title company, and their title company lied. So I bought and fixed up and sold. At the time of selling, there is this thing coming up where I am supposed to pay, and I try to claim the title insurance. They refuse to pay me.
So here's what will happen a lot. Start complaining to TREC, Texas Real Estate Commission, because a lot of those people are licensed agents. Start bringing it all up to TREC, and a lot of things will start happening. And it's very unfortunate that they're able to stay in business, but you know there is a lot of negative feedback. It's not just mine. Like you go into any Facebook forum and you ask for feedback about some of these companies, and you will really quickly see the community stand up and say, "Don't do business with them." Okay, I got 5 minutes left. Let me keep moving forward. Yes.
Just shortly talk about daisy chaining. What is it? When is it good? When is it bad?
Daisy chaining?
Yeah.
Daisy chaining is when someone remarkets someone else's property without their permission. That is what I call daisy chaining. Co-wholesaling is marketing someone's property with their permission. Daisy chaining is essentially when you take and you see somebody else marketing a property and saying, I think I can get more for it, I'll mark it up for more, and you start marketing it without anyone's permission. That's daisy chaining. I don't recommend doing it. Okay? And then make sure you got your performance clauses in there and your disclosures and agreements in your assignment contract. Pre-release of the earnest money deposit is something else I like to have. Address tenancy. this is important, the property will or will not be vacant at the time the title's transferred. Not all assignment contracts will have that in there. Guess what if you're a buyer? If y'all one of these people that are looking to buy, like you're talking about earlier, you're expecting to get a vacant property, there's still a tenant in there, you're trying to close. My assignment of contract declares tenancy at closing. Property will or will not be occupied at closing. So I disclose up front, the tenants are staying in place. The tenants are not staying in place. We've already agreed that's what's going on there. So if you are signing an assignment of contract and there are tenants in the property, you need to figure out what's going on with them before you sign it, because you don't want to inherit a tenant. Mineral rights, if you're choosing to do so, those are all things that I like to have in my assignment of contract. Yes, sir.
Is there any way that some of these contracts that you have that you can email out?
I do, but this particular contract was copyrighted by the attorney, but he did say I could sell it for $100. So if you want a copy of the assignment, it's $100, and I'll give you any of the other documents with it.
That'd be all the documents, or
I'm not going to say all, but any of the documents that I'm allowed to give out.
Okay,
Like I can't
right
give
on.
out my short sale packet. I can't, like the short sale packet alone was 20 grand. The sub 2 packet was 20 properties. I had to give somebody 20 properties to get that sub 2 packet. So those aren't mine to give away. But like the third party authorizations, the seller's leasebacks, this type of stuff, I don't mind releasing all that stuff too. But this one right here was done by Dodson Legal, and Dodson Legal said they don't want me distributing it. But if I do, it's $100, and I have to split it with them. Okay. So if y'all want that, is everybody in here a member of the Propelio Facebook group? Yes. Go to Propelio Facebook group, and we'll start a post in there. Just create a post saying, hey, I want a copy of the assignment contract. Everybody that posts in there, I'll get it out to you. Yes.
Yeah. Point number 3, when defining closing date, you're sitting with the seller, right, and you're contracting a next number of days to close. You mentioned 45 days, but you try to find a buyer that will close a lot faster.
I try to find a buyer immediately, and I try and get it closed as soon as possible. And I don't give my buyers more than 10 days.
Sure. How do you tell the seller, okay, I'm contracting with you for 45 days, but I'll intend to close within 5 days? Is that how you tell them?
So I'll tell them it's 45 days or as soon as I possibly can. Are you okay with that? And a lot of times, like I did a lot of pre-foreclosures. I did a lot of vacants. I did a lot of probates. So closing soon wasn't typically a problem. Now, if it's an owner-occupied property and they're scheduled to move at a certain date, well, then we might have to secure some sort of lease back, and or the buyer needs to have their funds sitting ready in escrow to close. Like, it really depends upon my comfort level with the buyer. Like, I'll say you've got 10 days, but if the seller's not wanting to close, I'll extend that buyer's contract if I feel like that buyer's going to perform. But I really don't like waiting until the very last day. I absolutely do not like waiting until the last day.
45 days or before.
Yep. I mean, like I just kind of had that conversation with the seller. It's like, I'm going to put 45 days on here, but I'm going to close it as soon as I possibly can. Like I might be able to have this done in 5 days. I might be able to have this done in 3 weeks. But I give myself 45 days just in case we have some anomalies happen in title where we've got some difficult judgments that we've got to clear. I'm giving myself 45 days. But what I really like about what she was doing, but it might pinch some other people, is she wrote into her contracts within 7 days of clear title. I really like that because that means I could run 6 months on that contract if I have a clouded title. But on the other hand, if title is not clouded, well, that might just say I've got 9 days to close. You know, so if I'm comfortable with performing, I would put that clause in. I kind of liked that one. Okay. You got a question? All right, let's get the microphone over to him, and I'm going to move through with the double close side because I do have. Oops. Yes.
Yeah, can you kind of clarify, you're talking about 45 days to close, but I've always heard that when you go and approach a seller, part of the selling point, I guess, is I can close quickly. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of contradicting there. So can you kind of...
It is, but everything is really dependent upon the seller themselves. So I would always want as much time as I possibly can. Now, if they're like, you know what? I want this thing closed in 4 days. Well, damn it, I'll close it in 4 days, but this is the price I'll have to do it at. And the reason I want the longer term is so that way I can start using some traditional funds, using some other capital, and those other people take time to close. If you want me to close it with my own cash, I've got the cash to do it, but since you're gonna make me use my cash, that means that I can't get the loan. The loan allows me to create leverage, which increases my ROI. With the increased ROI, I'm willing to pay you more. Well, if you're not going to give me the 45 days, you're not going to give me 30 days, you're not going to give me 3 weeks, you want it done in 5 days, here's my 5-day price. Because like the leverage, like even if I'm not even talking about wholesaling, just for me personally, it's like if I am buying this, the leverage increases my cash on cash returns because I'm not having to put $100,000 out of my own bank to buy it. Well, if I'm able to leverage somebody else's capital, which is going to take about 10 days to get it done on average, well then, in that particular scenario, I want a bigger discount. So that's how I'd handle that conversation. Any other questions? We're about to wrap up on this segment. And I think we're going to lunch, yes, no? Yes, so we're going to lunch after this. For everybody that's watching live, I believe there's a couple hundred of y'all watching live right now.